Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Build and Scale Boldly podcast, the podcast for purpose driven women entrepreneurs who want to grow their businesses with more profit, more ease, and more impact. I'm your host, Letizia Alto, a physician, entrepreneur, and real estate investor. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is so foundational to who I am as an individual, and that's intentional lifestyle design. This is for those of you who feel like maybe you're checking all the boxes, but you're still not fulfilled, or maybe you've built a business and you feel like it doesn't actually support the lifestyle you want. If you feel that way, know that you're not alone. A lot of people feel that way, but there really is another way. And what we're going to be talking about today is how you don't just grow a business and adjust yourself to that business, but you actually design a life you want first and then let your business adjust to that. And so we're going to be talking about what really works. And this is something that I have been doing actually going back to 2015. And I kind of sat down and I thought, what were all the pieces that led me to be able to design a life I love, even despite, having multiple businesses, traveling half the time, and having 3 kids, I still actually managed to intentionally design my life and do so that I now am in a position that I have a life I absolutely love and a life that I envisioned way back in 2015. And so I really wanted to talk about how you can do this too, for those of you who are out there and just not feeling like you have intentionally designed the life that you currently have and who are wanting something different. So here's the truth. Most people are not designing their lives intentionally. They're really reacting to what's going around them. And most people don't really stop and ever step back and say, what do I really want? Instead, they follow what they think other people want them to do, or what their parents want them to do, or what the culture says that they should do. And they think about what's realistic and they build their lives based on that in response to other people's expectations and in response to cultural norms and in response to what's realistic. And in the end, they may not feel fulfilled, right? Because they're not actually doing what they want. And they haven't even actually mostly stepped back and said, what do I actually want? And they feel resentful. They feel disconnected. You get the feeling of like, is this it? And I remember when I had this feeling, probably at this point, 15 years back, I remember when I had this feeling. So I want to normalize it, of course, but say that there really is a different way. And so what I would really like to do in this episode is give you guys a framework for how to design your life intentionally. And this is a framework that I was asked to recently speak at a conference. And I sat down and I said, what are all the steps that I took? And what are the ways that I was thinking and the questions that I was asking that got me to be in this point of my life when I truly do have a life that I love and a life that I designed many, many years ago. And I kind of put those together in a 5-step process. And that's what we're going to be covering in this episode. Okay, so what's step 1 of intentionally building a life you love? Well, it's actually creating a vision, but doing so without limitations. So this actually happened to me many years ago when my husband asked me, what do you want out of your life? How do you want to live? And I started describing this path that I was on and all the things that we were going to do. And he said, no. What if you had no limitations? How would you actually want to live? And what would your life look like? And that was allowing me to not just be reasonable or practical or realistic or do what everyone else expected of me, but actually to ask myself, what do I really want my life to look like? What do I want it to be about? What do I want? How do I want to spend my time? Who do I want to spend my time with? All those questions that I think most of us don't really ask. And so what I ended up doing was painting a totally different picture for him of what I wanted my life to look like. And actually, it really circled around hosting and having my friends be able to spend a lot of time with me and creating a community for my kids to grow up with. And it was so different than the path I was on that it really was kind of surprising and gave us a moment to kind of say, well, if that's the dream, how would we get there? And so it sent us on a totally different path. This is actually how we started real estate investing in the first place, was having a different vision for what our lives would look like without the typical limitations that everyone puts on it. And so I really think this is the first most important step of building a life intentionally that you truly love, is sitting down and saying, what is my vision without limitations? And actually writing it down, putting a pen on paper so that you really see what it looks like and asking yourself, what does it feel like to live this life? What does the average week look like? Who would I be with? How would I spend my time? Those types of questions, and putting it on paper, out of your head onto paper, and again, making sure you're not doing it with limitations, because your first kind of pass may actually have some built-in limitations. So ask yourself, am I really letting what other people think is possible for me influence me, or what I think is possible in this world based on what I've seen in the past? Because the past doesn't determine the future. So that's step number one. Sit down, write out a vision without limitations for what you really want. Now, while you're doing this, I wanted to throw in this little bonus step. It's not a full step, but it's a bonus while you're doing this if you find it helpful for you. And one of the things you can do is, when you look at the vision you have for your life, one of the things you want to look at is your values. And these are the values that are currently driving your life right now. And then when you look at your, envisioned ideal life, what are the values that would drive that life, right? And they might actually be different values. So what are values? Well, values are really, what are you prioritizing? How are you living? So for example, if my value is contribution, I might live a very different life than if my value is significance. And so there are certain values that are underlying how you're leading your life right now. Maybe one of your values right now is obligation. That's actually one of the things that's really driving a lot of your actions. Maybe one of your values right now is love and connection, and that's how you're spending your time. So what I would say is, when you have that now vision of your life without limitations, I want you to think about your current values that have been driving your actions and behaviors the last, 5 years, and think about, hey, in order to get to my space where I have this vision of my life that doesn't have limitations, what kind of values would really be fuel for that life? Maybe a value of yours is being adventurous, and that's what's going to actually fuel that life. Or maybe that life is going to be fueled by love. It just depends. So this is, again, a little bonus step that I would put in here, but it's like choosing 3 to 4 values that really need to be driving values for you in this ideal life, and your own definition for each one. And the definition piece is important, because my definition of adventure might be different than your definition of adventure, or maybe one of your values needs to be faith. That definition of faith might be different from my definition of what faith looks like. And so it's not only writing down the word that has emotional resonance for you as a value that's going to drive your behaviors and actions, but also what's your definition of it. So you have clarity of vision of, like, I'm going to know I'm living in alignment with that value if this is happening, or if I'm acting in this way, or if I feel this way. I think it's really helpful to define those values as this little bonus step, because it kind of gives you guardrails to kind of know if you're on the right path to creating that vision, because a lot of what we seek in these visions really is how we feel, and your values drive a lot of what you feel, because they drive the meaning that you give to things. So just to give you an example, if one of my values is love, this is a really important value to me, and actually I recently looked at my own values, and this is the most important value to me, is love. And so, for example, my definition of love might be, I bring love and presence into every room I enter. I leave others feeling seen and valued. And so if I'm living in congruence with love, then this is the result that I'm going to see all around me. And again, this whole step, this bonus step, is powerful, because your values do shape a lot of your decisions and a lot of your behaviors. And so if you have clarity on your values, you may find it's a lot easier to feel the way you want to feel, and to ultimately get to this, vision that you've created without limitations. Okay, so number 1 was create this vision without limitations. Number 2 is clarifying your emotional why. And so what is your emotional why? Well, this is the reason that you want to do this, right? The reason that you want to create this into your reality. And I love what Tony Robbins says, which is reasons come first and answers come second. Why you need an emotional why is because it's going to keep you going when times get tough. It's actually the fuel and the emotion behind you taking the day-to-day steps to create that vision of what you really want. And so some of the things you can ask yourself to come into and to get clarity on your why is it so important for me to build this intentional life? Why else? And what will it do for the people I love and the people around me if I build this life? And all of those things will allow you to see the result of it and to tap into the emotion of why it's so important. Do you want to make it emotional as if it's almost real? And so one thing that could be helpful is actually closing your eyes and visualizing what it feels like to have this why driving you, and to be in this space of living that visualized future. And you'll feel those emotions and you'll feel why it's important to you. And a lot of us will do more for anyone else than even ourselves. And so that's why I asked you to tap in. What will this do for all the people I love around me? What will I be able to contribute to the world? Because oftentimes we'll do more to help others than we will to help ourselves. And so that may be part of the really fuel you need to be able to tap into your why and really clarify your why. And so again, like the first step, I would encourage you to sit down, write out your why, do some of this journaling about why it's so important to do this and why it's going to help other people. And write it down so that you have that clarity of vision. And ultimately, this would be something you could look at many times down the road, right? You can always go back and look at that vision and look at that why and just kind of re-energize yourself to keep going. Also, speaking of the why, one other thing I really thought was important to say is when you're thinking about how this will affect other people, I really do believe this, which is that life supports that which supports life. So if your goals and your vision supports more than just you, if it's going to help other people, if it's going to help your loved ones, if it's going to help, the greater good of the world because you're going to contribute in a more meaningful way, I think that in some ways life will help it be so much easier to be able to get where you want to get. And you'll find the energy and the alignment to be able to get there. So I think this is also a really important step to why you want to get clarity on why it's going to help other people besides just yourself to be able to get there. Step number 3 is building your plan. And really, of course, dreaming these first 2 steps, so much fun and so playful and so light to be able to do that. But you also need a plan to be able to get there, right? And you need to go from vision to execution, because if you're just sitting around envisioning all the time, not taking any action, maybe it'll work out, but odds are it probably won't. So you probably want to develop a couple goals each year that are clear and specific and measurable that allow you to move towards your vision. And then each quarter, let's say you have, a couple goals for the year that's going to move you closer to your vision of your intentional life. Each quarter you have several things that you move forward, several projects you move forward. These are called rocks in EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, that actually support those goals. And so what you might want to do is develop a couple priorities for the quarter, and then under those priorities have a couple action steps that you're going to take to be able to reach those priorities. So you have real clarity of what needs to happen in order for you to fill those priorities, in order for you to ultimately get to where you want to get at the end of the year with your goals for the year. And one book I really love is Gary Keller's The One Thing. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about it before. And that book really helps you get that clarity of execution and focus that can help you move your priorities forward. And that question is, what's the one thing I can do that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And so if you're looking at your goals, your intentional vision of your life and your goals for the year that are going to help you move towards that intentional vision of your life, but you're not sure what you need to do this quarter, or maybe you're looking at your priorities for this quarter, but you're not sure what action steps to take first, this is the question you should be asking yourself. What's the one thing, right? That if I do it, is going to move the ball forward most. And then it just gives you that clarity to focus, and you're going to start taking much more action when things are simple, because complexity is the enemy of execution. So the easier you can keep this, the more simple you can keep this, the more focused you can be, the more progress you're going to make. Okay, so step number 3 was building your plan, and step number 4 is executing like a boss. Now, you've heard me probably mention that what's in your calendar reflects what you value, and if something not in your calendar, it's not going to get done. And so now you have this plan, and you have your yearly goals that are going to support you reaching that vision. And you're even built down to having quarterly priorities that have action steps under it, right? But now you need to schedule time in your calendar. And I would suggest at least 90-minute blocks a couple times a week to be able to take those action steps, to be able to complete those priorities by the end of the quarter, to be able to successfully get to your yearly goals. And So you want to lay out the action steps that you're going to be doing every single week. You're going to have that focus priority time laid out in your calendar, because execution is just not going to happen, right? It's created through intention, follow through. It's created by those ordinary actions every single day, kicking the can a couple feet forward. Or as James Clear says in Atomic Habits, that 1% shift per day, right? It's doing that over and over again, small steps over and over and over again with consistency that ultimately get you to the space of creating that vision. Okay. It's probably not going to happen in a quarter. It's going to have to take some focus and some consistent action to be able to get there over sometimes the course of years. It took me about 3 years actually of consistent action to get to the point that I really wanted to get to, with developing the freedom from my job, the ability to work on my terms, the ability to travel a significant amount of time, the ability to be around my kids a lot more. It took me about 3 years to be able to do that. And it didn't just happen in a month. It was consistent action day after day after day. And it was those small things that added up, right? In real estate investing, it was looking at deals every day and being able to find great deals to buy properties that cash flowed, that ultimately created the source of income that set me free. In my business, it's, showing up every day, making sure I have those clear goals for the year, and making sure I have some focus points that I just want to move forward that week to support my quarterly priorities. It's a daily action that makes such a difference. And finally, step 5 is measuring your progress and adjusting as you need to. So this step is really huge and a lot of people skip it. But what you really want to do is at the end of every week, ask, did I complete my action steps for the week? What's my completion rate of those action steps? And if you complete most of your action steps, and those action steps support your quarterly priorities, and those quarterly priorities support your yearly goals, and those yearly goals that you set year after year are getting you closer and closer to your intentional vision of your life, then you're going to be making progress constantly. And if you find that you're actually off track, you're not making progress in the way that you thought you would, that's a sign to you that you need to adjust, right? That, we don't always know the right steps to take, or sometimes things change, or the environment changes, or regulations change, or whatever changes. And we need to change too and adjust what we're doing in order to, really focus and get to that intentional vision. And I have to add also, sometimes your intentional vision might change, right? I wouldn't create an intentional vision and say, this is my intentional vision. And 10 years later, you're still focused on that intentional vision, but it's not actually what you want anymore. So this is not only about measuring your progress along the way and adjusting, but also once in a while, maybe once a year or once every couple years, at least look at your vision that you've set for your intentional lifestyle and say to yourself, does this still fit what I really want? Because things can change in your life and you might actually want to change that ideal vision. And if you just continue to do the same things to get to your old vision and you never question and ask, do I want to change it? You might get somewhere and still feel empty, right? And still feel like, is this it? Because it wasn't actually what you wanted. It wasn't fulfilling anymore to you because you are a different individual, because we all change along the journey. Now, when you're measuring progress and you're adjusting, I would also encourage you to measure both quarterly and yearly and look at those goals for the year, set new priorities every single quarter, refocus your action steps if you're not moving in the right direction that you want to move even during the quarter, and then go back to that vision, ask yourself if it still fits, and then set new goals if it no longer fits and you want to go in a different direction. Okay, a couple final thoughts. When you design this intentional life, this vision for your life that you really love, I really want to encourage you to still enjoy the journey. And I know this is easier said than done. And many of us are so focused on goals that we don't enjoy the journey along the way. But it's really important that you put in some things into your daily practice that allow you to appreciate what you have already, to experience gratitude, maybe to recognize magic moments that have happened, to slow down and allow yourself rest so you can look around and you're not just always going somewhere, but you're actually present in where you are right now and seeing what's beautiful around you, because it's incredible what's around us every single day. Even waking up, taking a deep breath, that's the most beautiful thing, to be alive. And a lot of times we're rushing off to something and we miss that joy of the morning coffee or a kid's hug. And those things add so much joy and beauty to us. And yeah, it's not quite as as sexy as living this life of where you're traveling or you have financial abundance or all those things that you guys are going to create. But that journey along the way can be in so many ways just as beautiful if you slow down and you pay attention, right? And you look for ways that it is already beautiful. And so you don't want to fall into the arrival fallacy of someday things are going to be good and be miserable along the whole way. And again, how do you do that in practice? You make space for meditation, you make space for journaling, you make space for gratitude, you make space to recognize magic moments, and you allow yourself some rest so that you can be present and that you're not just running to the next space. Oh, and finally, be around people who think this way too. Be around people who are joyful, who have a lot of energy, who are building big things and dreaming and have lives of purpose, but are also enjoying the journey along the way. Okay, because to be human is to really want to grow. So creating this vision of an intentional life, that's a really human thing, right? To want to grow and to want to build something bigger than what you have today. But even with that, you can still do both. You can want to build that and look forward to it and relish in the idea of getting there and still enjoy the journey along the way. You can do both. So I would just encourage you to enjoy the path to building the life you love. And actually what you'll find is you love the life you have right this moment. And you also are going to love the life that you design that you have years from now. You're going to love both of them. Now, if today's episode really got you thinking about designing a life with more intention and having more clarity on what you really want, I created something to really help you take the next step. And that's kind of putting all the pieces of this podcast together, because it's a pretty extensive podcast, in this free guide that I'm calling Intentional Lifestyle Design, How to Build a Life You Love. And it walks you through this exact 5-step process that I cover today. And it gives you space where you can actually do some journaling and reflecting and planning and, get to the space where you've actually built out this vision of the lifestyle that truly fits you and what you want. You can actually download this at www.beyara.com. So that's beyara.com/lifestyle. And that will help you start mapping your next bold chapter in your life using this framework that we just went through. Okay, so now a quick reflection question to wrap up this podcast episode. So where in your life are you currently following somebody else's vision for life, right? For success, instead of your own vision of what you really want? And one small shift you can make this week to live your life more intentionally in alignment with what's important to you, in alignment with your values, and in alignment with what you really want. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Build and Scale Boldly podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you know another bold woman entrepreneur who wants to build an intentional life, one she loves, as well as grow her business, share this episode with her. Keep dreaming big, keep leading boldly, and most of all, keep building the business and life you love.